Theorizing that primetime audiences were ready for a new time travel series, NBC and creator Donald Bellisario debuted Quantum Leap on March 26, 1989. Starring Scott Bakula and Dean Stockwell, the series followed Dr. Sam Beckett for 5 seasons of time-hopping adventures, spawning novels, comics, and a fan base that has clamored for decades for a revival. Now, with Raymond Lee and Caitlin Bassett starring in a new version of the series that dangles just as many new threads as it does old ones, we'll ball the string up and explore the revival and the ways in which Quantum Leap has always entertained and inspired us here on Oh Boy.
Oh boy, it's a Quantum Leap podcast. My name is Nate, and with me as a co-host we can all see and hear, it's Brian Martin.
Hey, everybody. How's it going?
Brian, it's late. We've both had long weeks.
The dark of night. Well, your son started school yesterday, right?
That is correct.
God, it's the very beginning of August. What are they doing to these kids, Nate?
I know. Is your kid in school yet up there in North Carolina?
No, he does not start until like the 28th, I think.
Well, see, that makes more sense to me.
Yeah.
I don't know. They start school at 9 a.m. here.
Oh, wow. That's not bad.
Well,
I mean, it's kind of bad for you.
I was going to say it's incredibly inconvenient.
Right, yeah. You're like, can I drop him off at 7:30, though?
Yeah, right. Exactly. I mean, we got places to be.
The problem is the teachers. No, I'm just kidding.
That part I'm leaving in.
Oh, boy.
So, since the last time we met, I will say I have watched 2 more episodes of Highway to Heaven.
Oh, good for you. Wow.
Well, you know, what I found is that they've become very pedestrian.
Okay.
They become more familiar television, just like your regular kind of run-of-the-mill TV. I've discovered there's a formula to this show.
Comfort food.
Granted,
yeah.
I've seen, 5 episodes or something of that nature, but they all have a very similar pattern, which is they'll somehow run into 2 people that both have problems but will solve each other's problems when you bring them together. And every one of them
Deus Ex plot device. All right.
Yeah. It's like each storyline, there's always a divergent storyline, like you would think a plot A and a plot B, but somehow plot B always solves the problem for plot A.
Oh.
4 episodes after that pilot, they've all followed that same pattern.
So what we need to do is figure out where in this series they introduce the evil version of our characters.
A fallen angel somewhere?
It's just straight up a demon.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, maybe. I don't know. Maybe over the course of 6 seasons, they break pattern a little bit, but I mean, sometimes formulaic television works. Go, go, Power Rangers! It's been working for the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers for the better part of 3 decades.
Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong.
Same episode every week.
Is your kid into Power Rangers right now?
No. Right now, my son is into the Titanic.
Like the movie or the boat?
No, like the boat.
The actual boat.
He'll watch the sinking part of the movie.
Oh,
I see.
see.
He'll watch the boat sink in the movie. Doesn't have too much interest in the rest of it. But he built a giant Titanic out of cardboard and painted it up and everything before school started. It was a good little project for him.
Yeah, making a giant boat out of cardboard only slightly likelier to stay afloat than the actual Titanic.
Yeah, it could last just about as long, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what he's into these days, the Titanic. Power Rangers have not come on his radar.
Wow.
Good segue here is I had to dig out all my long boxes to find the subject matter that we're discussing tonight.
Oh, wow.
So I pulled out all these comics that I had hidden behind a desk, and I thought, well, if I'm rummaging through these things, maybe Waylon will wander on in here and he'll get a glimpse at the comics. He's 8 years old now.
Maybe he'll suddenly develop an interest.
Maybe it's time. And no,
was not time.
Not so much. No.
I'm not sure that pulling out a few assorted issues of the Quantum Leap comic book series is going to do the trick, Nate.
Well, I had to find them. I did have my comics alphabetized, but oddly, Quantum Leap just happened to be like floating books or whatever, and I just happened to find them. They were not between Spider-Man and Robin the way I would have liked. But I did notice in pulling up all the books that I have Domino #1.
Oh, that's fun.
Which I had.
Is that the one with the Stelfreeze cover?
I have no idea.
I'm curious.
And I also have a miniseries, Mystique versus Sabretooth.
Ooh.
I'm just kind of pulling these books up every once in a while, and I'm like, what is this? What was I reading? Like, it was basically, I haven't seen this comic before, and I would pull it off the rack and buy it. I mean, that's what the 90s were.
Oh, sure. Sure, a lot of that. I didn't know there was a Mystique Sabretooth anything.
Neither did I.
Huh.
But I've been lugging it around every time I move.
That's the way we do.
Yeah, really.
It's the chains we carry.
Yeah, I don't know. At some point, maybe when he's 10, we'll go back into it.
Try again.
I'll see what I actually have there that's interesting. But I was on a mission to find these books that we've got here in front of us.
Yeah, I did not have to do any long box diving for these Quantum Leap comics because I don't own them.
You did not manage to get any paper copies then?
No, the asking prices for some of these comics are, I would say, outrageous. And this is coming from somebody who has paid well over $100 for issues of Uncanny X-Men in recent years. I'm like, look, I got my limits, man. All right, so on the one hand, I am willing to pay over $100 for the first appearance of Kitty Pryde and the White Queen.
Okay.
I don't think I'm willing to pay over, I'm going to be generous and say $35 for a single issue of a Quantum Leap comic book.
What is your top price for Quantum Leap #1?
I feel it is close to $10.
That's where you would go, $10.
I think I'd go $10.
I couldn't sell this to you for $12.
Call it a day. No, I don't. I think $12.
Wow.
I am out of the market on that one.
Wow, really? Some fan you are.
All right, there are artists coming up in this series who are very well known and very well regarded.
Yeah.
Comic book artists.
Okay.
I don't believe the first 3 issues, which are the ones we're going to be looking at this evening, feature any of them.
Yeah, I was going to say I don't recognize any of the names, honestly.
So licensed comics have always kind of been a thing. For those of you who aren't steeped in comic books, forever, comic books have been either a gateway to or a stop on the way from various mass media characters, be it radio shows, be it television shows, movies. This sort of cross-pollination has always happened, and comics have kind of always been at the center of it. Dick Tracy and Batman and Superman serials, getting into even like the 1960s and things like 2001: A Space Odyssey, which became a series a few years after the movie was released, or Planet of the Apes was another big comic book franchise, Lost in Space, like things like that were on TV that ended up crossing over into comics. So the fact that something like a Quantum Leap comic exists is not in itself surprising, because even in the late 80s, early 90s, and even today, there's still a lot of this licensed work coming in comics. In fact, the late 80s was a wild, wild time for licensed comics. I mean, for God's sake, there was an Alf comic book that Marvel Comics was publishing.
Remember Alf? He's back in pod form.
He was back in Pog form.
Yeah. He's back. No less than Bill Sienkiewicz did a cover for Alf.
Oh, no kidding.
Mr. Elektra Assassin did.
You are a historian of this kind of stuff, Brian. I am constantly impressed by your encyclopedic knowledge comes with these comic books. A lot of these books now, one, they're usually the source material for something else that you've seen.
Sure.
It's basically just a
test kitchen.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, it's basically a pool of content that creators can come down and pick up a story out of comic books these days and put it into some other media. A lot of times people think that if they make a comic, they can turn it into TV. Like, I'm going to start this as a comic so that it's a television show one day.
Not naming names, Mark Miller.
Not naming names, Nate Bowden. No, it's just kind of the way things are, like Smallville's 13th season was a comic book.
Yep.
Buffy, the same way. Their last season was also a comic book. So, yeah, you're right. Cross-pollination is a good way to think about it. But it seems now that, I don't know, in reading these, I wonder if the transition from TV to comic books is always successful.
And that's one of the questions I have for this.
Yeah.
Right. So innovation was around from 1988 to around 1994. And believe it or not, at one point was the fourth revenue-driving comic publisher in the market. And this is before Image, of course, came and blew up everything. Right. But it was Marvel, DC, Dark Horse, and Innovation. And Innovation was buoyed by all of the licensed stuff. They made a handful of original series.
Yeah.
Most of their comics that they were publishing were based on established franchises like the aforementioned Lost in Space. Hard to imagine a Lost in Space comic really having traction in 1989, but hey, there we go. Dark Shadows was another one that's like, I guess there's just this cult following for it.
Okay, yeah.
Psycho was on the Nightmare on Elm Street, Child's Play. Mm-hmm. Beauty and the Beast, not the Disney movie, of course. I'm talking about the TV series with Linda Hamilton and Ron Perlman. And then Quantum Leap kind of thrown into the mix there. They were kind of just getting every license they could scoop up.
Yeah, I think Anne Rice's The Vampire Lestat was one of their
like all of those Interview with the Vampire things were also a part of it.
Granted, I haven't read any of that.
Sure.
I wouldn't even know what Innovation was if they hadn't put out these Quantum Leap books.
Yeah, no, probably not. I guess I vaguely remember some of these other comics just sitting on the shelves at my comic shop, but
I imagine they were covers that I just kind of glanced right past.
But like, I was distracted. I was distracted by the flashiness of things like Sleepwalker #1 from Marvel Comics and Darkhawk.
That's right.
In all honesty, the X-Men of that period.
Yeah, sure.
Silvestri and Jim Lee. Rob Liefeld was doing New Mutants and X-Force. Like, those are the things that we remember from 1990, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So when you open up a comic like Quantum Leap 1, I am not expecting to open up a Quantum Leap comic and see Rob Liefeld art or anything that looks adjacent to it.
No. But if we had, maybe it would be a little different result.
That would be nuts. Can you imagine like a Rob Liefeld illustrated Quantum Leap comic book?
Well, maybe not Rob Liefeld exactly, but maybe somebody a little flashy, you know? Like, Rob Liefeld is a notoriously terrible artist.
I would call him a notoriously stylistic artist.
Oh, my gosh. Look, hopefully you have some understanding out there, but if you don't, look some of this stuff up online. His anatomy is just off the wall. He is really
self-taught.
He does say he's self-taught.
Liefeld was self-taught, and his teacher was comic books, the comic books that he grew up with. And he was like, I think I can do this.
So he exaggerated exaggerations. That's kind of his issue.
I will freely admit, I was completely taken with all of those guys back in the early 90s. Not a one of them was unengaging for me. So,
well, yeah, he's not without purpose. Liefeld, his stuff jumped off the page. Yes. These are the guys that started breaking panel borders, and splash pages and stuff like this became popular. This was an era when artists were the rock stars.
Yes.
And these days, the writer is what makes you buy a book.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So
absolutely true.
People are looking for storylines now. Back then, it was who's drawing this book.
Yep.
And that is probably why I have Sabretooth Mystique crossover in my collection, because I can't imagine being engaged too much by that story.
So we're just trying to contextualize what the medium looked like typically at that time. A lot of big, bold figures, a lot of just ink slathered across the page.
Right.
Hatch marks.
Makes me want to go back to that time. It really does.
I mean, to this day, there's nothing quite like a Silvestri or a Lee X-Men comic.
Right.
From like 89 to 1991. They look unlike anything else.
You know, one book that I never really read, but I always loved the art was Savage Dragon.
Yeah.
I mean, just this stuff.
There is a kinetic fury about a lot of those Image guys' work, whether it's Larson, Portacio, all of those guys.
Yeah.
McFarlane,
Sam Keith.
Oh my God. Talk about somebody who is just looks unlike anything else you've ever seen.
Right.
I feel like looking at Quantum Leap, okay, on the one hand, I do not expect the characters in a Quantum Leap comic to look like comic book heroes.
Right.
But the art in the 3 issues that we looked at really looks like very young artists struggling to capture human forms and environments and succeeding some of the time. That's kind of where I would put the art for the Quantum Leap series.
I've got a couple of comments on art for each issue as we go into it. So
I kind of do want to go issue by issue and chat a little bit about it. So
yeah, and thankfully, you were able to find these digitally.
There is a website online where you can find the books in this series, including some unpublished issues. I think issue 14
interesting.
was not published. It's at quantumleap-owlsplace.com.
If you want to follow along with us here.
Scans of all of it, yeah. And it's probably, frankly, the best way to find it.
Probably.
quantumleap-owlsplace.com.
I have physical copies before we get started here. I've got issues 1 and 2, which I read physically.
Wow. What's the ad on the back of that one? There's Child's Play 3, of course, because they are publishing Child's Play books.
What's on the back of the first one? Oh, the back of the first one is just, it's a fold-out cover.
Oh, nice.
Which really makes absolutely no sense. I kind of wish you had a paper copy to look over that with me. It's a really bizarre back cover because when you open it, the image goes together, but there's this weird... I'll show it to you and see if you can tell.
What is it? Just summing up what the book is about? It's like 3 lengthy paragraphs of information on the back cover of this book.
Yeah, but look at the picture. Like, who's that woman?
Who is that?
Wait, it's got nothing to do with the story. Like, for anybody that can't find the back cover to issue 1, okay, there's a woman walking in a flowy dress in front of an old man in a wheelchair and what appears to be the floating head of a child.
None of that appears in the first issue.
And none of it has anything to do with the issue, but if you fold the book out, it's part of the picture of the cover. So I don't know what's going on right there. And I wish I could share it with you all. At any rate, I have issue 1, 2, 5, 8, and 12.
Okay.
I think I got most of these off of eBay in the early 2000s.
Okay. I want to kind of focus as we go through here on a few questions. One, how effective are these stories? How well do they capture the tone and aesthetic of the show? But something we're going to find as we hop from issue to issue is that the creative teams change every single story.
Yeah.
And I also want to talk about whether that's a plus or a minus.
Look at you giving us structure.
So, anyway, this first issue opens with a 2-page recap of the prologue saga cell for Quantum Leap. The familiar Ziggy voiceover is captioned. We see a lot of familiar imagery of Sam in the accelerator. That accelerator scene where the gas is kind of enveloping him and he starts to leap.
Yeah.
I felt like I was ragging on the art on this a little bit unfairly. That kind of has some, I don't know. It reminded me of The Human Torch, Alex Ross's Marvel's book, the first time he ignites. And that may be kind of high praise for this.
Red is an interesting choice there.
Yes.
I think what the colorist is doing is looking at the page as a whole and laying down a red background to these heavy blues that he's
100%.
Using in the other 3 panels, but it struck me as odd.
It visually looks different than the show. I think it is a visually appealing page of comic, though, because of the balance of the art, I think.
I don't know. I mean, I see what they were trying to do, but just later in this same issue, and I don't mean to skip ahead so quickly, but if you go all the way up to page 21, there's a very monochromatic using blues and purples.
Yes.
And I think a similar look in the opening page where you can still have that familiar kind of aqua blue color scheme that is Quantum Leap. I think that might have worked a little better for me.
Okay.
Because I really like what he did near the end of this story.
Yeah, that is a pretty good looking page.
Yeah. So it sat with me a little funny, to be honest.
So we get these first couple of recap pages summing up the story thus far. And then we see him leap in to a school classroom. The date is March 25th, 1968, and Sam has leaped into Karen Connors, a brand new teacher in a classroom that has had two previous teachers quit. Miss Connors has just started teaching a group of at-risk students, and they are not the most agreeable class of kids.
Right.
But Sam is there to, theoretically, help them succeed on their end-of-year testing, essentially.
Right. In order to keep their program alive.
Yeah, because this whole pilot program is going to collapse if these kids don't make the grade at the end of the year.
What's that Michelle Pfeiffer movie?
Dangerous Minds.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of, like, this is a Gangsta's Paradise situation.
Well, what it strikes me as, it's like, what does Quantum Leap do? Let's use our very first issue to end racism.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, there is definitely, and like the first two issues here in particular feel like they have a lot to say about social commentary and really lay it on a little bit thick.
Right.
And especially for an opening issue of your Quantum Leap comic. Like, this feels like it should have been maybe issue 3 or 4. This is not laid back. It's not really fun.
No.
And I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean it's a very serious story for your opening volley, especially considering the third page includes an image that takes up most of the page of Sam Beckett wearing like a go-go dress.
Yeah. Yeah.
And these like go-go boots.
Is that how teachers dressed in the 60s?
I mean, like, I don't care if it's Scott Bakula or a woman. I can't concentrate on shit in that class, man.
Yeah. As I flip through these pages, it is pretty clear that this artist is making a good attempt to get those visual gags you get out of the TV show when he's dressed as a woman, you know, close-ups of him having to cross his legs, you know, and seeing that short dress all the way up near his hips. I like what the artist is trying to do there, trying to give it that same look, I think, is sometimes more successful than others.
Yeah.
Some of these pages are just super nice, and then others, not so much. Like, I really like page 21. I really like page 19 for anybody that can actually flip through these things.
It's a very...
Bottom half of the page.
The lower left-hand corner of that page.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
That whole page is just aesthetically very pleasing to look at.
Yeah, it's good work right there.
It's really good, yeah.
But then there are other pages in here that it's very muddy.
Muddy is a good word for it.
It's a painted look, and...
Yeah, you can practically see the canvas.
Yeah, and it's just too heavy in a lot of these pages. It's just too dark, and it washes out.
Then you've got this sequence about halfway through the book that takes place mostly at night.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it's like, yeah, all the colors are very, very dark. Although I do think that this sequence I'm talking about, where a bunch of ne'er-do-wells confront Sam and...
How do well?
Yeah, Nair.
Ne'er-do-well.
Just Nair. Confront Sam thinking he's this Mrs. Connors and engage in a fisticuffs with him. And I think that fight is generally well choreographed. Something I really love about the fight sequence in this issue is that you can almost constantly see Sam's reflection in the window behind him as he's fighting. So you're getting this kind of mirror image of Karen fighting these guys.
That's another thing where they're trying to mimic something you'd see on TV.
Yes.
Like they would definitely show these types of things in a reflection.
So like one of my favorite pages in this book is probably page 17, which looks like any random page might have looked from a mid-70s Marvel book.
Yeah, that's actually got one of my favorite lines in it. That first word balloon from Al.
Like Sam,
trying to hold off one of these.
I can't hold him off much longer, says the intangible holographic partner whose outstretched fist is passing through this big dude's head.
Yeah,
this
it's
big
really funny.
dude looks like Blade, for God's sake. You know, I mean, like he's this huge, muscled up, jacked dude with a switchblade.
Yeah.
Just bearing down on him. It's a great image.
It's fun. My thought has always been, if you kind of squint a little bit at the page and it all flattens out, then you're missing something. You need some more contrast in there somewhere.
Sure. Yeah.
I see what they're trying to accomplish here. And I will give them that the likenesses are really pretty good.
Yeah, I think he goes out of his way to kind of make sure that they look pretty good. And I also think the back half of this book generally looks better than the first half did.
Yeah. Okay.
To the extent that they look like totally different artists sometimes.
Yeah.
And it's really that outdoor fight scene where it kind of turns. And then everything that comes after that page looks much different than what preceded it.
Yeah.
It almost feels like the first half, we were talking about that painted kind of look. It feels like the second half was done more traditionally for whatever reason.
Which is a little weird. Maybe it was a time thing. It's still kind of painterly, but he really uses some more vibrant colors on page 20. And then, of course, that page, I really like page 21, which is sort of monochromatic because he's using that color scheme to indicate that this is a montage. This is your comic book version of a montage. Time is passing because they're essentially the students just taking a test.
Right.
You've got your fight scene or whatever, but the whole story hinges on kids taking a test in a classroom in a comic book.
Something that Sam ultimately has very little control over their performance, Talk about your harrowing leaps. Has there ever been less of a guarantee he's leaping out of this situation?
You only have 20 some odd pages here, but how long was he Mrs. Connors?
He leaped in on March 25th, and there is a device at play in this issue that lets you kind of gauge the passage of time.
Oh,
right?
Okay.
So it starts on March 25th, but this is something I definitely wanted to bring up because I think that one of the through lines in this issue kind of harkens back to A Leap to Die For, the fan film we talked about a couple episodes ago, in that Sam starts to wonder if he's not here to save the life of a major historical figure.
Right.
In this case, it's Martin Luther King, who is shot in the early hours of April 4th. So we kind of get an idea for how long Sam is there because he leaps out on April 4th.
Okay.
The last page of the leap talks about how MLK was gunned down.
Right.
And Sam is lamenting not being able to stop it, right? Because he really wanted to be there. Ziggy, Al says, did predict a 7% chance he was there to prevent the assassination of Dr. King, which is better than 0.
Yeah, and that's why he was out walking for that fight scene. He was just out walking in the middle of the night out where he knew Martin Luther King was staying, outside the hotel that he stays at.
Yeah.
And he's just kind of strolling about because he kind of thinks,
maybe I'll just run into him.
Yeah, maybe I'll run into it. I don't know what he was doing out there, but it gives him an opportunity to interact with one of the students outside of the classroom and make this connection to the student as an inroad to the rest of the students. It works.
I think it works. Yeah, I think the story between specifically Sam and that one specific kid whose name was Randy,
yeah,
is pretty effective. It's easy to see this story and imagine it being translated to an episode of the show.
Yeah, I think there would be some things that you would change in doing that. Let me tell you, folks, if you look at some of these pages, there are a heck of a lot of word balloons.
Oh, yeah.
So they are doing their darndest to stick within the 20 some odd pages that you get. But I feel like if this were on television, even just in a standard 45-minute episode, Connors would somehow have like a faculty member best friend or a roommate or some kind of person that fleshes out her world instead of just her budding relationship with Randy. The show has always done a great job of placing Sam in an environment that feels real and solid. Like, this character has relationships with these other people. And I feel like most of the stories that we're talking about tonight, I guess they don't have time to do that.
Yeah, I was going to say they skirt it, but then I thought about Sam's outfits in this issue, and I thought maybe skirt's not the right word.
Ha! Maybe it's the perfect word.
So he spends over a week as Karen Connors, but we never see her life beyond this classroom. Not really.
Right.
So yeah, I think that would be kind of expanded upon in a more traditional episode of the show.
And for him to accomplish what it is that they said he accomplished at the end of this, a week seems like a very short amount of time.
Oh, I mean, anybody who's ever taught a classroom full of unruly teenagers can verify that. Like, you know, I mean, like, they either knew their shit or they didn't at this point in the semester.
Yeah, and at the beginning, they make a whole big point about how no teacher has been able to handle these kids. They've all been chased away. By the end, they say that all they needed was somebody to stick around for a week.
For a week.
You know? Like,
right.
I guess Sam is just that good. But
right on, as Randy would say.
Or chill out, man.
Chill
That was a cute little moment. There are some things that dialogue-wise read pretty well.
Yes. Yeah, that chill out, man part.
If you can hear Dean Stockwell and you can hear Scott Bakula in your head, you can read them with that intonation.
And I think it largely succeeds on that front. I
really do.
Especially too. One of the things all three of these issues really have going for it is the interplay between Al and Sam. I think is pretty well captured, especially in the first two issues.
Most of them, yeah. Certainly the first two.
Talk about issue 3 once we get there, I think. But overall, yeah, I think this is a relatively good adaptation of Quantum Leap.
One of the things that I really like about this issue, like you said, the test is taken. They turn in the papers, and Sam has to sit around and wait for the results.
Yeah, days.
Days. And I actually really kind of dig that. There's this great shot of him sitting in the window, just kind of waiting for the phone to ring. You see that kind of thing in the show.
Yes. Yeah.
An introspective moment to kind of think about what had just transpired. Take a minute to soak that in. I really enjoyed that they did that.
Yeah.
Before we get off this issue, I've got a couple of things that I think you probably missed in reading your digital versions, which are these inserts.
Yes, okay, I don't have any of the ads or anything that are in there.
If you actually have the physical copy, folks, there is a special preview of the Psycho comic in there.
Ooh.
With a really nice illustration of...
wow, look at
that.
That Alfred Hitchcock illustration. That is
really nice.
That is really impressive. Who did that?
It is
Do we know?
To mention.
Wow.
But the art of the preview in there for Psycho, it's all painted. It's super nice.
That looks really good. Like, I want to hunt that. Looks just like Vivian Lee. Or Janet Lee. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Janet Lee was the one in there.
Really beautiful artwork.
Wow.
But the main thing, the writer of this issue writes up a little paragraph here at the beginning. He's an editor at Innovation. His name is George Broderick Jr.
Yeah.
What I found really humorous is where they're discussing bringing Quantum Leap to life in comic book form. He mentions more than once that this was one of the top 5 properties that he suggested that they bring on.
One of the top 5 properties.
Yeah. And he does it more than once. So bizarre. Like, if you're writing to say, boy, I love the opportunity to do this thing.
This was my 5th choice.
It was definitely in the top 5, folks.
Wow.
How many ideas did you bring to your senior editor that you're thrilled to be working on?
He was
your
like,
top
well,
5?
Dark Shadows, Child's Play, tried to get Alf, but Marvel scooped that one up.
I don't know. It just struck me as really funny.
That is...
Like, okay. Also in the middle here, there's a thing called Back Issues Plus. And it's kind of a listing of some of the other issues that this company has put out. And I was kind of flipping through it, trying to find Married with Children. Because I remember in our
that
first
was a different
episode,
publisher. It was Now Comics that did Married with Children. Yeah.
Right.
I was trying to remember where they all separated, who ended up with what, but Now Comics had.
There's no Married with Children comic here at Innovation, but in doing so, there's a book in here that was advertised as full color art by Adam Hughes! Exclamation point.
Oh, what's the book?
And I was like, already back in pre-1992, they're advertising a book on Adam Hughes's art.
Yeah.
It's called The Maze Agency.
I don't know if I'm familiar with it.
Don't know what that is at all. Didn't find anything of real substance, but it was definitely him.
Wow.
Because you know how he signs all his artwork, the AH with the exclamation point. Yeah. So that's probably one of his very first publications here at Innovation, The Maze Agency. And that would be one of their originals.
Yeah. I mean, with Adam Hughes behind, it's got to be like a flagship book for them, I think.
One would think, but I mean, how big was he at this time? That's the question.
Yeah, I guess so.
And this is just about 1992, because the last thing I'll mention, and we'll move on to episode 2 here, there is an ad in here for Quantum Leap t-shirts.
Man, I wouldn't mind having one of those.
Yeah, pretty sweet. And at the bottom of it, it says, coming soon, Quantum Leap Convention.
Oh.
It says here, plans are afoot for an official Quantum Leap convention with the stars and the production people to be held in Los Angeles in early 1992. For more details and ticket information, send a self-addressed stamped envelope to Creation. Address as above.
Oh, the good old self-addressed stamped envelope.
For more information. Oh, brother.
Wow.
It's like stepping back into the past.
Yeah, that's a real time cap. It's like we're quantum leaping.
But those are the things that I wanted to share because I knew you didn't have a paper copy in front of you.
Wow.
So outside of that back cover, which is hilarious, the Adam Hughes art, the idea that this is, hey, one of our best 5 ideas.
Hey, you know, I would have loved to have seen Adam Hughes do a Quantum Leap comic.
Yeah.
Like, if we get Adam Hughes
Why
down
not?
on this thing, like, do just one issue. All these artists are doing, like, one issue.
That's not exactly in his wheelhouse, if you know what I mean.
No. It's not cheesecakey enough.
Yeah.
But the man can draw anything, but we all show up for the one thing, mainly. So maybe the most obvious route for a Quantum Leap comic to take is in that last page, leap out, leap into the next issue, and having a little tease of what the next issue is going to be about. And we get that at the end of the first issue with Sam leaps out of Karen Connors and into someone we will come to know as Willie Jackson, a journalist currently on death row, and Sam is being strapped into an electric chair as we speak.
Right.
It's June 11th, 1962, and this is an interesting one because the next issue just kind of starts there in that leap. The electric chair doesn't work, and Sam postulates it's because of the energy surrounding his leap. It shorted the chair out.
Shorting the chair out, yeah. Interesting.
Interesting take. He looks a little bit like Ed Norton in a couple panels of this issue, I gotta say. The artist on this particular issue is Rob Davis, another name I don't really know.
Did we give credit to the artist in the first issue?
I don't think we did.
What was his name?
Artist was Mark Jones.
Mark Jones.
The second issue is written by Robert M. Ingersoll with pencils by Rob Davis. This issue also plays like a pretty typical episode of Quantum Leap, I think. Sam is in jail for a majority of it. I will say one thing that this issue immediately has over the other issue, Al looks great. I think in this issue, once Al shows up, he is immediately recognizable. He looks like he does not belong there, right? In this just ridiculous looking lime green coat.
Questionable attire.
Yeah.
Something of that nature.
Yeah, this is it.
Right.
But overall, I think the facial expressions for Al look great. They capture his hair that's always a little bit disheveled.
I agree. I think they both look good.
Yeah. The art overall in this issue, I think, is a bit more consistent in its look. It doesn't just have this major shift halfway through.
If you're reading these back to back to back, it's a very welcome change for me.
Yeah.
Because like I said, that other one was so dark and really kind of muddy, and this one does not suffer from that at all. The clarity is there.
The colors pop a bit more. I hate to say that the orange in the prison jumpsuits really pop off the page, but it does, and it contrasts well with the earth tones of the courtroom. Art-wise, this looks more like you would expect and your brain kind of expects from a comic book.
Yes, that's a good way to put it. And those of us that have worked in comics know getting through all of these pages means not spending too much time on any one particular panel.
Right.
So if something's maybe just not quite working, you just got to leave it and move on.
Yeah, exactly.
Or you'll never finish the issue. So there's some pages in here where it's a wonky panel here and there. But for the most part, pretty solid likenesses throughout. And before we get too deep into it, I'll mention that there is a letters page in the second issue. And because we mentioned it specifically, there is a letter from a Mark Johnson in San Diego, California, which I will paraphrase his rather lengthy letter, actually. But he says, "The only complaint that I had about this comic was the coloring." He's talking about issue 1. "In many instances, the colors were too dark. If Scott Rockwell would just tone down and use a few brighter colors, everything would be perfect."
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Like, the darkness was a choice. It wasn't something he had to do.
You know, the editors always respond to these things, and their response is, "We agree about the dark printing. How do you like the coloring in this issue?"
Yeah. Maybe that was
And maybe there
Sure.
was some printing issues, but I think a lot of it's probably just the color choice of the artist.
Everything in this issue and the second issue looks sharper, though.
Yeah,
the line
I
work is a
agree.
lot sharper. The panel layout is a bit easier to navigate.
Also seem a little more amateurish, though, in places.
I mean, it's very rote. It's not really trying anything new. And I guess that's what the first issue was, kind of trying to look a little bit unlike something that was just typically on the stands. It looks more like a comic book that you could pick up from any publisher that was not Marvel or DC, right? Like, this isn't up to Marvel and DC standards for that era.
Yeah, no, it's certainly not. I mean, maybe it's like you were saying, it's like a springboard into some other kind of work.
Even later in this series, there are a couple of noteworthy people who go on to pretty big careers in comics.
Yeah, I look forward to you
pop
mentioning
up.
who those people are. I'm not going to let you.
I don't even think I'm going to mention them on this episode because we'll get to them eventually.
Oh, well, yeah.
But
sorry, folks.
sorry, yeah. If you're interested, just look them up and then just figure it out for yourself. I don't know. But anyway,
Just telling the audience to stick it.
I feel like the artists working on this book were probably pretty green as far as the industry goes. And
Yeah, for
were
the most
kind
part.
of cutting their teeth on this stuff. So story-wise, what do we think of this?
A lot of sitting around.
Yes.
I mean, he's in a prison cell for the bulk of the story, and the only other area being a courtroom. So while something like that can be captivating on television because you get caught up in the dialogue and what have you, this is one of the ones where I kind of question, does it translate to comics?
As far as people sitting around talking, there is one page that works pretty well for me. Okay, there's 2 pages I kind of come back to in this. One is page 11, which is
Turn
one
to page 11, folks.
Yeah.
quantumleap-alsplace.com.
Let's see.
Bling. It's just the same image 5 times of the interior of this cell, and the characters move slightly. Al is pacing back and forth
Through the bed.
but it's mostly word balloons. Like, 45% of the entire page is just word balloons. And I don't think this page is very effective. But when I contrast that with just 3 pages later on page 14, another 5-panel layout there that looks pretty similar, except it's close-up shots of Sam and Al and the other prison inmate. And as we go down, we see Al's kind of exaggerated motions and his facial expressions change. And Sam kind of seems to get a little bit more concerned. His face grows slightly more grave the farther down the page you get. And I think that page is actually really effective. But it's largely because of the two characters on your shoulders kind of thing going on. And Al is like just so animated on the left-hand side of the page.
One of the things some artists really struggle with is this talking heads situation. When you've got people just sitting around talking, you've still got to make that art visually interesting. And you've got to come up with angles that you're going to shoot it from. You've got to come up with something the character might be doing while they're sitting there and talking, you know, whether it be folding laundry or some kind of action that you can give your character to do if it's just two people in a room talking.
Right.
And no artist has any fun with that, but you really have to force yourself at it, you know? The page that you're mentioning here, page 14, I see what he's doing there, and there's a nice progression. I will question panel 1, though.
I think that's weird.
What is going on
like,
there?
Where like Sam is like split above the Sam head. I don't know what that's all about.
I don't know what his goal is, and if you can't see this, folks, it's a 5-tiered panel page. There's a floating panel of Sam's head over where his head would be anyway.
But it's 5 inches higher, like above his shoulders.
It's really bizarre choice.
It is
like, I don't know what he's
weird
doing
choice.
there.
I don't know what that's all about. Yeah.
It kind of throws off the whole page for me.
I think it's kind of funny. That's why I was like, I'm gonna let it go because it kind of cracks me up a little bit, but I don't know what you're going for with it.
I think that the next page is more successful.
Oh, the next page is great with Al in the bed.
Yeah. There you're really getting some interesting angles and some, how can I make these two characters talking in a small room interesting?
Yes.
You also have the added advantage of one of your characters being a hologram that can be inside solid objects.
Yeah.
I think they've still got the voices of the characters in this, especially Sam in that scene that we were just talking about where he has to kind of whisper to Al, muttering under his breath for a whole thing about a fellow journalist here that is refusing to give up his source. And for the greater good of free press.
This kind of reminds me of the episode of New Quantum Leap where Jen was the hologram and was trying to convince him to just be completely unscrupulous about certain things.
Yeah, a little bit.
You know,
a little bit.
Because Al is like, you've got to convince this guy to betray his ethics.
Yeah, right. He's done that in the show quite a bit.
Sure.
In fact, as I was reading that, I was thinking, you know what? There are a lot of episodes where Ziggy is just wrong.
Yeah.
It's a staple in this show to have Sam's gut feelings be right where the computer calculating its odds are wrong.
Yeah.
And as it turns out, the other way just means beating up some folks and stealing a car. But...
and having a brush with history.
Yes.
I don't know if you groaned like I did.
I did.
When we got to this part when he's fighting these guys, beating these guys up using like high kicks and patented roundhouse. Al saying, nobody here knows who Bruce Lee is yet, so it's all going to surprise him. And who should be watching from the sidelines and just falling in love with these martial arts but a young Steven Seagal. Oh my God.
Right, Steven Seagal.
One of our worst people. Sam is now inspired.
Well, at this time...
Oh, and this time he was king of the world.
Under Siege, right?
Yes.
Under Siege has just come out, and I really think that's his one good movie.
America loves Steven Seagal in this era, for sure.
In 1992.
Yes.
Yeah. I think the line just before that is even funnier. Nobody in 1968 knows what karate is.
Right.
Good thinking, Sam. Beat these people up.
Steven Seagal may be responsible for exposing Western society to martial arts thanks to Sam Beckett. Is that what we're...
That's the implication.
Oof.
Yeah, this page is hilarious from beginning to end,
it's pretty
honestly.
Great. It's pretty funny.
It's great in a maybe not great way. I don't know. He's trying to convince these police officers that the guy that just got off for murder was going to go kill his friend's niece, or something.
It's pretty hardcore. The back half of this plot, where this guy who is going to be implicated and kind of gets off, goes to murder the journalist's niece, I was like, that
in
seems...
retribution.
Yeah, he literally leaves the courtroom, the courthouse, and goes straight to the part to assassinate a young girl on her birthday. The back half of this plot felt like an episode of New Quantum Leap, honestly. It felt like this is just funny. So over the top and so intense. It is kind of crazy. But of course, Sam is able to afford it. So.
The guy is like a medical doctor. He's decided he's going to murder this person's niece.
It's intense.
I don't know how he was killing his patients, but my guess is not with a rifle from a car window.
Yeah.
In like a drive-by with a rifle.
Yeah, that's like the Punisher's origin.
And pardon the pun, but this is a leap of logic. I mean, luckily he's got Ziggy to confirm the fact that, yes, this guy's going right now, leaving the courtroom to go kill this guy's niece.
Have you ever been that pissed off about anything?
to leave immediately. It's like no plan.
This comic is definitely committed to one and done, right? Like they are definitely committed to wrapping their stories up very, very quickly. And if anything, the second issue does feel a bit imbalanced because so much of the first half is just those talking heads. And then in the last 4 pages is when all of that crazy shit happens. So it's...
In my notes here, I said the climax is just like Mission Impossible 6. Smash your car into somebody else's car.
It's the whole plan.
Finds the bad guy who's driving in a car and smashes his car into it and saves the day.
I mean, okay, so I think the third issue is probably going to be at the bottom of the pack. This one's a little bit rough, guys. So I just said they're really tied to the one and done. And the next issue is a totally different story. Well, this third issue of Quantum Leap, for whatever reason, they decided to do 2 stories, breaking each one into about 15 pages for an extra size issue. And yeah, I would say the results are a real mixed bag here.
Yeah, this one I had to read digitally as well.
QuantumLeap-alsplace.com.
This is, I think, the only issue I ever saw physically out in the wild. Because I remembered the cover of Sam as a mall Santa and the screaming kids and the line of kids in front of him. And I just thought, God, that looks miserable. I bet that's a funny one. Well, now I finally read it and I'm like, it wasn't. It was not. So Sam has leaped into a person only identified as Nick. And everything you think that might imply is probably true. He's a mall Santa who is, I guess, trying to help a young... Nate, what's the best synopsis for this you could come up with?
Miracle on 34th Street?
Basically.
The long and short of it is he's supposed to try and get this girl to believe in miracles because she's lost her mother... And her father is working all the time
and he just
always helping other people.
He just wants to help everybody else out.
And he never has time for his own kids. And it's Sam's job to make this guy's daughter realize that all of those things are worthwhile and that he really does care and that he's a good guy.
It's fine that your dad ignores you.
And all the while, of course... Ziggy can't dig up any information on this Nick character you've leaped into.
Oh, yeah. What a mystery.
When you see his reflection, obviously he's got the long, snowy white beard. But for some reason, he's wearing a fake beard as the mall Santa.
Yeah.
The kids are pulling at his beard, and it's clearly a fake pin-on beard that a guy with a beard is wearing.
Right, so Nick has a beard, is wearing a fake beard over the real beard.
This issue...
This is rough, man. This one was real rough. Okay, so this one was written...
Art included.
This story was written by John Holland, with art by Andy Price. And this, oddly enough, not one of the later artists that I was talking about a while ago. I had a hard time just following what was going on in this issue.
I thought it might have something to do with the fact that I'm having to read this digitally and open files each time I wanted to see a page. Because even though this story was so transparent as to know exactly where it's going at every turn, every time I opened a new file to read a page, it seemed like I had missed a page somehow.
Yes. Yeah.
I kept scrolling to the bottom to read the page number to make sure that I had the right page up.
Right. This can't be it. There's at least
This can't
three...
be the next page.
There are at least 3 different points in this story where Sam and Al come to the realization that Sam has leaped into Santa Claus, and they're like, nah. 3 times that happens in a 15-page story.
Like, if you didn't already know exactly what this story was supposed to be, I'd be completely lost. Because, like you said, 3 times he, like, goes back to Nick's apartment, I guess, where there are some elves.
And he lives on 34th. I do want to point that out, too. Path of least resistance in your Christmas story.
He spends most of the issue following this guy Mark around, the co-worker at the mall, okay?
Yeah.
But when he does go back to his apartment and the door gets opened by these elves, that's where it ends. Clearly, he walks in there and spends the night there and wakes up in the morning and comes back to work the next day, but we don't see any of that.
Right. He spent an entire night in there with elves and is still like, nah.
Yeah, right. But for us as the reader, every time he goes to the door, we only see the elf for a second. It's really confusing.
Can I ask you a question? Speaking of confusing, page 9, what exactly, what the hell is this? Do you see this?
What panel are we
right
looking
in
at?
the center of the page, a ha got you panel.
Yeah.
Like, what in the hell is that?
Is he holding that thing that's kind of a baby with a man's hairline?
It looks like
oh,
it's
he's
a cat.
hugging a cat. He's hugging a cat.
So the little boy is sitting in his lap and hugging a cat, but like you can't tell what any of this is.
Oh my God! It's
anyway,
awful.
Anyway,
I feel bad. Who's the artist on this? That we're just. I mean, we're being really mean, but that it's not
it's
good.
Not great. It's Andy Price is the name of the artist.
I'm sorry, Andy. I'm sure you got much better. Hopefully, you look back at this and laugh also, and that you're much better off. One of the major problems that I've had with the art in this is that I confused Al with Mark
repeatedly.
More than once. Yeah.
Repeatedly, yeah.
So the Mark character's the dad that works for everyone but himself. And half the time I think it's Al. And then I'm like, oh, wait, what? That's no. There
is a single panel in here where Al showed up and I was like, I have no idea who this is. Because there's one panel where Al has Reed Richards' hair. Where like the sides of his hair are white. And he does not look like Al at all in that panel. Yeah.
All right, I'll say something nice. One of the things that I do think is fun is that each one of the pages in the margin somewhere has a little out-of-context image that's Christmas related.
Yeah, like a fluttering calendar page like December 22nd or like...
My personal favorite on, what is this, 13? Page 10. A little half-eaten cookie.
A cookie at the bottom.
And a glass of milk, you know?
Yeah.
So don't have anything to do with the story, but they're just there because, hey, it's Christmas. And I think that was an interesting choice by the artist, I'm sure.
Yeah, kind of exploiting the gutter space there to kind of...
Yeah. So, I mean, like, he's got ideas there, largely unsuccessful.
Look, I don't think,
I
think the art is a big part of the problem with this. The story, though, is just, like, extremely hackneyed. I can't say it's all that. You know,
the story's not helping the art any more than the art is helping the story because, like I said, you start at the top of a page and you got to go back and look and make sure you're on the right next page because
did I miss something?
No. Okay. All right. And that's not the artist's fault. So all the way around, I'm hard pressed to find something that works in this issue.
Yeah. So the second half of this issue is a story called The Infinite Corridor. I think this one's certainly more interesting than that first one was.
Yes.
More ambitious. I think maybe the only time I've ever seen a credited research and consultation professor, they actually had to get somebody to vet the science they're talking about through.
Huh.
The writer of this story is Link Yako, which sounds like a pseudonym to me.
God bless you.
Illustrated again by Andy Price, who illustrated the first half of this issue. And here's what blows my mind. The back half of this issue looks absolutely nothing like the first half does.
Wait, this is the same artist?
It's the exact same artist.
Let me pull up one of these. Oh, wow. Yeah, I can see some similarities now that you mention it.
Vague similarities, but it looks like these two stories were drawn like a year apart.
They very well could have been. I mean, that's plausible.
It's wild to me. The back half of this issue looks better, reads better. I kind of wish this story had more breathing room. I think it could have used another 5 pages.
Sure.
But it's definitely more interesting. So the idea here, Sam has leaped into a student at MIT a few years before Sam himself gets there. Matt, who is in a relationship with a young woman who is going to make a discovery that directly informs Sam's theory of time travel.
Mm-hmm.
So Project Quantum Leap and his original work with that is based on her previous research to a small degree. And Al shows up and is freaking out because Sam runs the risk of creating a paradox that could rip space-time apart, because if that discovery is not made and Quantum Leap is never founded, then the whole universe kind of caves in on itself.
Yeah, here we get to have an actual time travel conversation, because the whole reason he's there is to make sure that she discovers the thing that leads him to create the Quantum Leap accelerator.
Yes.
So does he then create his own causality loop?
Right. Did he come here to fulfill that destiny, or would it have happened without him there?
And if it was going to happen without him there, then his being there was just messing things up. What was he even there to do?
Well, yeah, it seems like what he's there to do is make sure that the two of them stay together and that she discovers this thing. But it also seems like if he had never leaped in at all, both of those things would have happened. So,
yeah. First of all, the art by itself, I didn't realize it was the same artist, so it's definitely better, but it's still not great.
Right. Yeah.
Although it is a vast improvement.
I can tell who I'm looking at every given moment in this one.
Right, exactly. And the story is much clearer. But narratively, it's confusing because he's got to get Matt and Ellen to fall in love, but not too much in love, just the right amount of in love. It's like it opens and they're breaking up, but they can't break up because if they do, she won't focus on her studies. She'll marry some nozzle that doesn't allow her to make the discovery that Sam needs her to make. So Sam has to propose to her and spend enough time with her, but not so much time that she doesn't study, because she's still got to discover the thing.
So we're 3 issues in now, and over 60% of the stories have been about studying.
Yeah.
So a couple of the big things before we wrap up here, I want to a couple things I was wondering about. So the medium of comics kind of has this limitless potential to tell whatever kind of story you want to tell. Do you think that to come into these 3 issues of Quantum Leap and have very grounded, fairly pedestrian, TV-adjacent stories is a disservice to what comic books can achieve? Wouldn't it make more sense to have a story that could not be told on TV?
Yeah. I definitely was thinking about that in the very first issue. A classroom? Like, seriously? This is, you're like your entire climax hinges on people passing a test. That issue in particular was, what does the show do well? Let me try to do that show.
Yeah.
And I don't know that that's a great way to succeed. And I'll give you an example from my own life. Do me a favor and don't go searching this out. But I had a story published in the Star Trek manga from Tokyo Pop.
Uh-huh.
Like volume 3, I think. I've got a story in there called Civic Minded or something of that nature. And it was a manga version of Star Trek, the original series.
Mm-hmm.
And I scripted this book with the sole intention of absolutely capturing this show. Like, how would these characters say these words? What kind of stories get told by Star Trek, the original series? And you want to talk about pedestrian. The way this thing turned out, this was in an anthology.
Mm-hmm.
So it was one of 4 in the same book. And every review that I read of my own work after the fact was, the Nate Bowden story feels the most like the show, but we've seen this 100 times.
Ah, yeah.
And it's like, yeah, you know what? They're completely right. At the time, it was like, what can I put in this book that will make people know I know Star Trek?
Yeah. And that's it. That's my whole thing. Like, you've got to play not to the franchise, you've got to play to the medium. Right.
And this was a Star Trek manga, so they got a big Gundam robot.
Of
and
course.
faced it off with the Enterprise. And I thought that was a terrible idea, and thought these people don't know what they're creating. They don't know the medium they're working. It turns out I was just trying to make what I know, and I ended up regurgitating something that could be done a million times. And I really feel like issue 1 is kind of falling into that same trap.
Yeah.
It's a relatively good story, and it would work fine for TV, and it feels like TV, but as I'm reading it in a comic,
there's a disconnect.
Give me something else, something that it has to be visually exciting in a comic book medium,
Something I thought, reading this and talking what we talked about earlier with the sort of artistic trends and the specific talents that were big at the time this series was being published, wouldn't it have been an obvious idea to do a Quantum Leap series where every issue he leaps into a character in a different art style, in a different sort of comic book environment? I don't just mean like leaping into a Liefeld comic or leaping into a McFarlane comic or something like that. I mean like leaping into Sergio Aragonés Gru comic.
Right.
Like where the style gets way out there, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, wouldn't that have been the way to go with this? I think that would have been
I think it's too outside the box.
It definitely doesn't comport with the TV show. And they would have been their own things, right? Like, it could not have existed in tandem with the show, which is something I will say about this book, is that it's very easy to see these as lost episodes. But, again, I'm just thinking in terms of playing to the medium, that would have been visually interesting. It would have kept you really on your toes. You never know what you'd be getting next.
Yeah. Where were you 10 years ago when I was writing Star Trek? Nate, you might want to rethink this whole exactly like you've seen before. Yeah. You're not wrong. I think that's definitely something that they should have considered. I think that might be more successful.
Who knows? Maybe there are issues later in this run that do something a little more out of the box.
I don't think so.
The next issue definitely doesn't, because Sam leaps into an actual box at the end of this issue as a contestant on one of those payola scandal quiz shows. I'm interested in that. I kind of wish there had been an episode about this. Pulled the rug out from under Robert Redford with that movie he made in 93 or something? 94?
I don't fault the artists, because I think the writers and the artists of this book, I think that what they're thinking is probably sort of the same thing that I was thinking, which is, wow, I get to play in this sandbox. Watch me make what they make.
Yes.
And it's not, let me take what they do and turn it on its head because I've got all these tools at my disposal. It's more like they're wanting to write episodes of the show, and they've got a comic book to do it in.
They may have had to. Like, that might have been the mandate.
It does say in one of the letter columns here that they had to submit these stories for approval.
Sure.
For the licensing to be able to print them. So almost certainly playing within the rules that they were given. But at the same time, like, I can see the creators of these books really feeling like they're writing an episode of Quantum Leap, and that's got to be thrilling. That's how I felt in scripting that Star Trek story. I was writing an episode of television.
Well, if I could play in the Star Trek sandbox, I'd probably bring back that giant hand. And I might have had the giant hand, like, bitch slap the giant robot.
Well, the giant robot does flip the bird at the Enterprise, if I remember correctly.
The great bird of the galaxy.
Yeah,
there we go.
I don't know. I feel like that is not one of my brighter moments as a writer. You go check out the other stuff I've done before that if anybody shows any interest. But I think this notion of like using the tools of a comic book and advantage of having a different creative team on every book, you could really make these look way different each time. And maybe ultimately more successful. Who knows?
Yeah, we may never know.
I have a good feeling that we will never know.
Yeah, probably not. If it's not Star Wars, I don't think they're really scooping up the licenses right now, you know?
Certainly not Quantum Leap. If they get a third season, do you think there'll be a Quantum Leap comic again? IDW pick something up?
IDW might do that. They're pretty good about the licensed stuff.
Yeah.
Star Trek, the Ninja Turtles, all that stuff.
Yeah, but this does make me question whether Quantum Leap is a viable comic book property. There's not enough time to flesh out the world that he exists in. But before we go, the cover artist is the same on all of these issues, and those likenesses are really nice.
Oh, the covers are very eye-catching.
C. Winston Taylor is the artist on the covers, and I was looking to see if I knew that guy from anything. The one thing I'll say before I mention this is Sam's face on the cover of issue 2 is a little weird. Like, what's his face doing there?
It looks like he's having a stroke.
Yeah, something like that. And like the mirror reflection is not reflecting properly because Sam is looking at us, but so is the reflection.
Oh, wow. Yeah, you're right.
He should be looking the other way. So yeah, there's some logistical issues there, but outside of that, the art is pretty close, and he does a really great Dean Stockwell.
Oh yeah,
especially the cover of the first episode. And I wanted to look into who it was, so I didn't go any further than this quote I found because I found it hilarious.
Okay.
I wonder if this is the guy, C. Winston Taylor. And I click on the thing, and it says, C. Winston Taylor always knew from a young age that he wanted to communicate through his drawings. Oh, this is the guy. Fighting in the jungles of Vietnam, where he ordered 2 bronze stars, helped to solidify this vision.
Holy shit.
I stopped right there. I was like, yep, that's perfect.
Wow. What a life.
The very next sentence.
Vietnam solidified this vision. He's like, I'm not leaving the house again.
I will forever be drawing because
chain me to this board.
Somehow fighting in the jungles of Vietnam solidified the idea that he wants to stay home and draw.
All right, man. Well, I think we'll revisit these at some point down the road. We'll read a few more issues.
Sure.
There's, I want to say 13 or 14 issues total, so we will definitely be looping back around to these, especially because, again, I want to get to some of the later issues that feature more consistent art and art from somebody who, again, becomes a pretty big-ish industry guy.
Well, you're just teasing.
I know. I'm just going to keep doing it.
And you know what? It's not even going to be after the credits here, folks. I promise you, he's not going to give it up.
I'm not giving it up. You just have to stay tuned for that one. And then I'll go into, because it'll take forever for once I get talking about this guy, probably. But anyway.
I like hearing you talk about comics. So, next issue, next episode.
Oh, man, I don't remember.
And I don't know if this is something we're going to tackle now, given that we don't have until October 4th for the next season to come up. But on our topic here, we're going to workshop our own season 2.
Ooh.
This will be unprepared, just back and forth conversation, workshopping what we think season 2 should look like. Might be a little early to drop that. Maybe we'll come up with something in between. But that's coming, folks, and it's going to be fun.
I think that'll be a lot of fun. That's one thing in reading these comics, it started to dawn on me just how much space is between us and the end of last season at this point. It feels like it's been, frankly, 2 months since. It's been
more than that, hasn't it?
We've talked about a lot of stuff since the end of that season. And yeah, I'm kind of interested to get back into thinking about what are their names again?
Right. Janice.
Ben Song.
Yeah.
Addison.
All those characters.
Addison, Augustine. I want to.
Are you ready to get back on a weekly schedule?
Oh man, no. I'm sure I will be once the new season.
The listeners demand it.
Though.
The listeners demand it, Brian.
Do they though?
So yeah, we'll see if we get to that. Let's feel it out in between and see what kind of time frame we're on, how close we are to October. Look forward to that, folks. It will happen.
Yeah. Oh, we will definitely be workshopping this next season. I'm looking forward to speculating left and right about it, man.
Absolutely.
All right, well, folks, thanks for listening. As always, if you'd like to get in touch with us, please drop us a line at ohboyqlpod@gmail.com. Send us bootleg comics, and maybe if you have any scans that are better than the ones I read this week of those issues, hey, send those along too. You can find us on X. Oh my God, what a stupid app. I remain at Captain Bern, CaptnBern.
And I am at Action Nate.
God, I hate X. When I woke up Saturday morning and the app button had like updated, Twitterbird was gone and now it's just X. In what somebody online described as, quote, incel font, which I thought was great.
Maybe we should just get off of there. What do you think?
Yeah,
we're doing nothing but bash
Nate,
it.
I just
it's
don't
not
remember.
Like anybody's coming to follow.
I don't remember what my handle is on like Threads or any of these other things.
Right. Right. We got to do a little more outreach.
Yeah, I'll need to write
somehow.
it down. I'll need to write it down so I can remember where you guys can actually find me on a platform that isn't a heaping pile of shit. Anyway,
I'm looking at my apps right now on my phone, and X is right next to Xfinity, and they're almost identical with different color schemes.
Nice.
Xfinity and X right next
Good
to each
job,
other.
Elon.
You too. Yeah.
You
oh
idiot.
My gosh.
Anyway, we'll see you next time, guys. Until then, I'm Brian.
Oh, and I'm Nate.
And we'll be here in the waiting room.